Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this edition of DockTales. We are here with Ken and Karen Stark. They are aboard Island Girl, and they are gold loopers. They're on their second time around, if I'm not mistaken about that. And they are joining us today from the loop. So for those of you who are new to joining us for DockTales, we do this at the traditional DockTales time of the day, which is when many loopers have tied up at the marina or sometimes at an anchorage and are sharing DockTales, their favorite beverage, along with some stories of the day. So since we're doing this virtually, hopefully you all have your favorite beverage with you, and we're sharing DockTales with a T-A-L-E-S, as in stories of the loop. So we love to bring in some of our gold loopers and let them give us all some of their stories, as well as some tips and information, and just share details about the Great Loop. So Ken and Karen are coming to us from the Hudson, and the Wi-Fi where they are is not great, so they're coming to us with a cell signal. Seems to be doing okay, but just bear with us if we have any small momentary glitches while their cell signal catches up with them. So Karen and Ken, thanks for being here with me.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been fun because I got to see you when you were in Charleston a month or so ago, and then saw you again in St. Michael's when we did the in-person DockTales and Looper Crawl. So I feel like I've been able to follow along with you as you're heading up the East Coast. So tell us where you are now.
We are in Kingston, New York, on the Hudson River. So we're probably, I don't know, maybe 100 miles from starting the Erie Canal. So we were in New York City a few days ago and just working our way up the Hudson. And it's rainy and thunderstormy the last couple days.
Well, the rainy and thunderstorming isn't fun,
No.
but hopefully that'll clear up. I know I've spoken to a few members in Canada over the last couple of days, and they've been telling me how hot it is. So hopefully the rain is at least keeping some of that heated bay for you.
No, it has been really hot. I think it was 95 today before the thunderstorm.
This reminds us a
Wow.
lot of being in Florida. You know, the cell just comes in the afternoon and you get rain and thunder and lightning, and
Then it clears up and it's really, really humid again.
So you are coming to us today from aboard Island Girl, where you spent a lot of time over the past few years. So let's start off with, tell us about Island Girl. What kind of boat is she? What made you choose her for the loop and stick with her for this time?
she's a 3988 Bayliner. And for those of you Bayliner haters out there, we did it once and nobody died. And we're doing it again. We've had her since 2015.
Yeah, we bought her way before we even knew we were going to do the loop.
Yeah. And so what else you want to know?
Well, tell us, so you bought her before you knew you were going to do the loop, but obviously you've had her for quite a while now. And you did mention Bayliner haters, and I think they get a bad rap somewhat because of some of the smaller Bayliners.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about, what you love about yours and why you think that they sometimes just the name, the brand Bayliner gets a bad rap.
You're right. The early versions of the Bayliners got a bad rap. They were the entry-level boat, and people thought that once they bought the boat that was all they ever had to do to them, and they fell apart. They left them parked in the backyard, filled full of water on a trailer, and they fell apart. The motor yachts are a pretty quality boat, really bang for the buck. I mean, on the East Coast, we paid about $80,000 for this boat. You compare it to a main ship, we've got a lot more interior space. We've got the twin diesels. The boat will do 9 miles an hour. It'll do 20 miles an hour. It'll top out 26 knots, roughly. We ran all the way from Cape May up to Atlantic Highlands in 7 hours, dock to dock, up in the Atlantic when we made the trip up, which you really can't do in a single engine trawler. We did pay for it today when we went to the fuel dock.
Yeah. But it was nice to be able to do that because we had one perfect, beautiful, flat sea day. So we just, put it pedal to the metal.
Because the next day wasn't looking good.
Yeah.
Right. So tell it, weather aside, when you're kind of going at your normal cruising pace, because you do have a go fast boat, but what is your typical cruising speed while you're looping? Or is there one?
8 knots, 9 miles an hour, roughly right around in there. We cruise with everybody else. I mean, we go fast a lot, but in the big river, Albemarle Sound, things like that. You just want to get it done, and
Yeah, I think our average speed overall for the 8 months that we took to do the 2018 loop was less than 9 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Overall.
Because
so
there's not
for
a
your
lot of
boat,
people can do it. You really can't go fast. The wake is terrible, and you just can't. So we for the most part, trawler speed. The boat gets about 2 miles of the gallon. In fact, it averaged over 2 miles a gallon on the 6,000 mile route in 18. And that's go fast, go slow. Go really slow in the canals in the dismal swamp.
right. So do you know, kind of on average or ballpark, what the difference in your fuel consumption is when you're going at trawler speed or 8 knots versus if you're really putting her up on a plane?
Yeah, it burns. It's got twin 5.9 Cummins in it, and it burns around 4 gallons an hour at 9 miles an hour. But and this sounds really strange, and you would say, well, man, that's ridiculous. But at 20, it burns 22 gallons an hour going 20. So when you do the math, it works out to about 1 mile to the gallon or 2 miles to the gallon, one or the other.
So half the fuel bill.
Yeah.
Double, depending on which way you're doing that math. But
Right.
It does.
Sure, and that can be significant, but there certainly are many who prefer a go fast boat to spend a little bit extra on the fuel in situations like you just experienced, where you chose to do that to put that extra distance in while you had some good weather. So certainly gives you some flexibility and some options. For those of you watching us on Facebook, you are more than welcome to post some comments. If you post them in the Facebook comments, Ken and Karen and I will see those here where we are, and we can answer those for you. So feel free to comment or to ask questions, and we'd be happy to field those as we see them. So tell us a little bit about your first loop, 2018. You mentioned 8 months. Tell us a little bit, where you started, and what made you decide 8 months was the right time frame? Because that's one of the biggest questions next to what kind of boat is how long will it take? And of course, everybody's different, and that's a hard question to answer. So tell us about your 8 month loop.
Right. I think that the length of time that it takes you depends a lot upon when you start, or where you start, I should say, because we live in Florida. So we started mid-March, because to start any earlier than that to come up the Atlantic coast would be too cold. It was cold anyway, but we started in mid-March. And so, the regular progression of the loop is up the Atlantic in the spring, across the Great Lakes in the summer, and down the rivers in the fall. And then you spend the winter in Florida or the Bahamas, but that's where we live. So we got back home about Thanksgiving. So it was just right at 8 months, and we didn't have to figure out what to do with the 4 months of winter because we were home.
Right. Well, that, of course, makes sense. We've got a shout out to you from the grandbabies. Hi to Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah. Hi, babies.
And actually, I'm glad that they have joined us and posted, because that's another thing folks wonder a lot is, once they leave for the loop and once they're living this somewhat nomadic lifestyle, how hard is that for those who are grandparents and want to see those grandbabies? Of course, we're in the digital age, so the grandbabies are seeing you on Facebook today, but how do you work that out, and how often do you manage to get together with them face to face?
When we did the 2018 loop, we didn't have those triplets that you just saw on there.
Wow, triplets. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a story. But we were in Carabel getting ready to do the Gulf crossing to come home, and I got the call from her and says, Mom, you better sit down. I have some news. But anyway, so we didn't go home to see anybody or anything on our first loop. And when we got back home in November, we said that was too long. We don't want to do that again. So this year, I've been doing FaceTimes and so on with the grandbabies and texting with the kids more often. And we are, in fact, leaving our boat next week at Shady Harbor in New York and flying to Washington State to see the family for a week. Our oldest granddaughter's graduating from high school, and so we wanted to be there for that.
Nice. And we also have a hi from Rick and Rock in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, they were actually on our boat in Canada last year doing
in 18.
In 18.
Yeah.
In 18 on the first loop, they joined us for 10 days. They're our boating friends in the Northwest.
Yeah.
Nice. So you're out there again, you're on your second loop. What made you decide, you've got the boat, you're living in Florida. What made you decide it was time to set out and do it again?
Well, you can only go to the Keys so many times. The Bahamas was impossible this year. And of course, with the pandemic, it was like, it's just time to go. You just have to get out and go. Yeah. And so we said, well, what do you think about doing the loop? We thought about doing the loop during the pandemic, and that shut it down. So this year it was like that. And they said, we decided we could get through the West Erie. We can take stuff off the radar arch, so we can go that way. We want to do Lake Champlain and the Rideau, but this is not going to happen this year. So not to say it'll never happen, because we might do it again. Who knows?
You never know.
Never say never. But it more or less the pandemic and just being cooped up and not being able to move and go when you want to go, and it just when things opened up, it was just seemed like the right thing to do.
Yeah. Now your home port is Southwest Florida, correct?
Yeah, Sarasota.
Sarasota, south of Tampa.
Mm-hmm. So on this trip around, when did you leave Sarasota?
Around the 17th of March, so mid-March again.
Okay. So in almost 3 months or so, you've gone, I'm rough guessing right now, but 2,500 or so miles. So that sound about right?
I don't think it's that far yet.
Not quite.
But yeah. Maybe
okay. But so, yeah, one of the really unique perspectives I think you can bring for everyone who is out there contemplating getting started on the loop, and those who perhaps are, just getting started, you've been around once and now you're doing it again in this kind of very different time for looping. So you really bring an interesting perspective with the ability to compare how things are. And one of the biggest questions we got, particularly last year, from those who were still trying to loop, even though a lot more was shut down this time last year, was how is the social aspect working? And it was impossible to answer at that point. And then it was, there weren't nearly as many boats out there. So lots of questions surrounding that as that has started up this year. So with a few months on this loop and 2,000 or so miles, and I think it's changed even since I saw you in Charleston. But when I saw you in Charleston, you were saying, it was still, there was still a lot of caution happening. Tell us what you were finding, from Sarasota to Charleston about people being cautious and what you think the reasons for that were.
Well, I think with the pandemic, for over a year, we've been conditioned to stay distanced from each other. Mm-hmm. And that's carrying on, I think, in all of our aspects of life, is that we don't approach people because we've been conditioned for a year and a half not to. So the first couple of months of the loop, we saw very few loopers. Of course,
on the docks.
Yeah, on the docks. So we've got the burgee on the front of the boat. And in 2018, if you saw that boat coming in with that burgee on, you'd go out and greet them and catch lines and,
and help.
And help, yeah. Sometimes too much help, I guess. But, and talk to each other and where you from and how's it going and everything. And the first part of this loop, there was none of that. I think people are just afraid not to, they don't want to approach because they've been conditioned not to. But our perspective is, for the most part, the people who are out here doing this are not the overly cautious, I'm going to stay in my home kind of people. And so you can go out and catch lines or whatever. And if people don't want you around, they're going to tell you. But for the most part, if you want to get together, you just offer. And if people want to, they will. And I think we're seeing that more and
Yeah,
more now as we've moved.
as we moved up here, came out of the Chesapeake, and you know, the CDC, you know, taking the mandatory mask laws outside away, you know,
And
I
more
think,
people vaccinated.
and more people vaccinated. I think that it's really made a difference. But people have been conditioned for a year to just not approach other people, and definitely not shake hands or hug or anything like that, you know. And so different from the first time around. What we're seeing now, being up here the last few weeks anyway, is we've run into some gold loopers, and we've kind of taken it upon ourselves, and they have, to try to, you know, have DockTales and have get-togethers and go knock on boats and exchange boat cards and invite people and tell them, you know, it's okay.
Yeah. Because for us, our most memorable experiences of the entire loop are related to people.
Yeah.
People we've met, and we have, what will be lifelong friends that we met on the loop and continue to get together with them whenever we can. And it's those relationships that really made us want to do it again.
Yeah.
And we miss those people because they're not with us.
Yeah.
To do it again.
Yeah. Well, no, and I'm glad to hear you say that, though, because I really do think people are being cautious at this point, more out of respect for others than out of concern for themselves.
Right.
Yes.
So when we talked in Charleston, I kind of, you know, you were trying to, you know, navigate that, so to speak, is how to let people know you're out there because you're okay with being public, and you know, that you're willing to help each other, just as has traditionally been in the loop. So I'm glad to hear that's kind of changing. And you know, in St. Michael's a few weeks ago, we kind of debated that event. You know, and we kind of thought, will people be comfortable coming? And okay, it's an outside event, but once you start to board boats, you are inside. And, you know, will people be comfortable boarding boats when they're in more confined spaces? And will people even be comfortable opening their boats, which is a huge, you know, looper tradition. And Ken and Karen were some of the first to sign up and say, yep, we'll come, we'll open our boat. And then they found out that Blue Angels were the same day, and they still said we'll still come, even though that's kind of a once in a lifetime thing. And if I was them, I probably would have opted for the Blue Angels if I had the option. But so we appreciate you stepping up and you know, being gold loopers and saying, yep, we'll be there, we'll open our boat. And it was a successful event, and I'm glad that people kind of started getting that they're comfortable and still staying safe, because above all, we want everyone to be safe, whether it's from COVID or just general boating safety. But it's nice to hear that people are out there and getting back to the social aspect safely.
Yeah.
And it was. I mean, the looper crawl was kind of, I think, the turning point is we saw people realizing it was okay. In fact, it's not just okay as a looper; it's expected.
It's necessary.
It's necessary.
Right. So you've continued on since then, as we've said. You're now on the Hudson. Of course, the big question mark still for this season is the U.S.-Canadian border, which remains closed at least until June 21st. So you mentioned Island Girl has the ability you can drop some things and get under the 15-foot bridge requirement for the Western Erie Canal.
Well, we'll see when we go underneath that last bridge. What's still up there?
We might have
So from what you're seeing out there, are most people, you know, are people still questioning, well, maybe we'll be able to go to Canada, or are they making firm plans, and any empirical data on how many people think that they can get through the Western Erie and how many are headed for the Welland?
I think everybody has a plan, but Canada is a contingency plan if it opens in the next, like the June 21st date.
Or July 1, somewhere around there. I think a lot of people will turn right because they want to go there.
Yeah.
If they'll let them in, they want to go there. The bigger boats are going to do the Welland unless they can do Canada. There's a lot of bigger boats. I mean, you know, there's a lot of people that are going to do the Welland, but I would say a majority are trawlers that are going to drop the mast and you know, take things off like we are and do the West. And we had made the decision that even if Canada opened, once we decided to do the West Erie, it's the route less traveled by everybody, and we were going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm. And you did do Canada your first time around.
Yeah, we did.
And enjoyed the Trent, Severn. We're from Washington State originally, and what you find in Georgia Bay for me and North Channel, it's beautiful, but it's rocks and trees. And I grew up with that in the San Juan Islands and the Puget Sound, and it was like, this is like being home. You know, I don't really think I need to do it again, but I understand why people want to do it.
It is beautiful.
It is beautiful.
But speaking of that, there is the option that if you can do the Eastern Erie and go up Oswego, cross Lake Ontario, and stay on the New York side of the Thousand Islands in the St. Lawrence River and
take a side trip.
Because it's gorgeous and it's very similar looking to the North Channel. And then if Canada doesn't open, you can come back down and go on to the Welland.
But if it does, you're there.
Yeah.
You're right there at the border, and you can cross, and you'll be right on schedule if they open by July 1 or so.
Right.
Because the St. Lawrence River down there around Clayton and Alexandria Bay and where Bolt Castle is and all that stuff, that was some of our biggest surprise. And we'd never heard of it before, being from the West Coast, and it was just beautiful.
Yeah, it was.
And that is what, many people call that a highlight. So
it is. It is.
Yep. And Wendy Wilson, as we were just talking about you before, Wendy, I was saying how you did the very first one of these before we used this, the software that Kent and Karen and I are using today. And we didn't get the interaction part. So thanks for interacting, Wendy. And yeah, Wendy did do a presentation.
And we saw it.
Oh, webinar. That's right. You all were there, but on the Western Erie and going on, spending some time in the Thousand Islands. And while we don't know if Canada will open, it's looking slightly, a little teeny bit more like there's some activity going on. A couple of credible news outlets, I will say, reporting without named sources, that discussions are happening and that perhaps the problems or the damage it is doing to tourism is pretty extreme, and that they should start to consider that. And one of the things that, again, this is all, I usually don't like to share things until I'm sure that they are true, but the unnamed sources are saying that there's some possibilities that Canada may look at a vaccination passport, as controversial as that is. And I'm certainly not speaking in favor or against that, because I think everybody's got to make their own decision on whether they want that vaccination. But that is one thing that's being thrown out there a bit now that I previously hadn't heard a whole lot about, is that perhaps Canada would have some options such as that, or perhaps they would have some options depending on your country, your home country. All still up in the air, certainly nothing set in stone, but it's nice to hear that there may be some discussions going on behind the scenes that may lead to an opening. I'd like to say sooner rather than later, but we still don't even know when that might be, because if it gets, as Ken said, much past that July 1st date, it starts to get a little bit late for loopers to make it all the way through the Canadian portion of the route, back out into the U.S. and the Great Lakes before the more challenging weather starts to set in. So typical time frame for most loopers entering Canada is right around July 1st if they're going to do the Trent Severn. And you're there for Canada
and we can't forget about all our looper friends up in Canada that want to come south.
Yeah,
absolutely, 100%. And actually, it sounded like that. If Canada does not, in fact, choose to start letting some recreational travel happen, it's possible that the U.S. may break from that. It's been a reciprocal thing for the whole time.
Right.
But some of the accounts I've been reading is that the U.S. may actually start to let people come in, even if Canada doesn't, which would be great for our Canadian members who would love to continue the U.S. And it would be great for some of our Canadian members whose boats have been stuck here for over a year now, and really love to, be able to continue the loop and get their boats back to Canada. So, opening is hopefully in the near future for both countries. So it'll be interesting to see. But for the time being, anyone who is on Nebo, which is the app that AGLCA has adopted for members to help members locate one another on the water, knows there's a lot of boats out there. And for those of you who don't have Nebo, it is a free app. It does more than just help you find other loopers. It actually emails you a daily report of your travels. There's some free webinars on the greatloop.org website about Nebo and how it works. But one of the things Ken, Karen, and I were discussing before we started is that if you look on Nebo right now in the area of pretty much anywhere from the Chesapeake on up to the Erie Canal, tons of boats out there. And it's a little bit disconcerting because you start to go, oh my gosh, is it really crowded out there? Is there dockage? So what has been your experience on finding dockage as you've been traveling with a fairly large group of loopers?
I don't think we've had any cases where we couldn't get a reservation where we wanted it. And I'm usually just making reservations the day before or maybe 2 days before our arrival. So it's not way far in advance because, you know, you never know what the weather's going to do. But we haven't had any issues yet. And it is nice to have Nebo because you can see who is where you're going. And you can just click on it and send them a message and ask them about stuff. In fact, I did that with somebody who was here yesterday. Somebody I'd never met, but I saw him and I just sent him a message and asked, how is the Wi-Fi there? And they said, not good, but the cellular's good. And I said, okay, good. Well, I think we might be able to do this then.
Well, and we thank you for being prepared for today.
Yeah, so it's a really useful tool. And it's fun to be able to see who's coming behind you, that, you know, it's like, yay, there's our friends are coming in tomorrow, you know, or whatever. So it's kind of a neat tool.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it does appear crowded when you look at Nebo. It looks like there's a lot of boats out there. At the same time, we've never really had something like Nebo before. So as Ken pointed out earlier, there's not much to compare it to. We had Nebo last year, but there were fewer people cruising. And I think we probably even had already adopted it in 2019. But you know, anything like that takes a little while to kind of roll out and catch on. So we also have, you know, we have shoreside members who use it. Harbor hosts, for example, to kind of mark where they are and to look for other loopers coming into their area. So it's been a great tool, and I don't want anybody to look on Nebo and think, oh my gosh, there's too many boats, we should just stay home. And I
think it might be normal. It might be normal. Without having the ability to see it all in a normal year.
Well, like in 2018.
In 2018, you know, we didn't have it. You know, we had a few of us using it in the beginning, and, you know, so you didn't get an idea. It's just kind of overwhelming to see how many people are out there.
But I think they always were here.
They were always here, I think. We just didn't have the ability to see them.
Yeah.
I do think that that's it. And I do think that, you know, there may be a few more people out there, just natural growth of boating and growth over the pandemic with people having more interest in boating. I'm not getting the impression that this year is particularly busy because people put it off last year. And it's nice to hear that from someone who's out there and kind of confirming that, you know, that's kind of the way it is. So talk to us a little bit, you know, you mentioned kind of at the beginning, a little bit about the cost for Island Girl specifically. At whatever level you're comfortable sharing, you know, if you're comfortable telling us, you know, roughly how much you spend per month or per week or even for a whole loop, or what, you know, what's your impression? You know, there's a question, I don't know that we can answer this. The question that came through is, do you have to be rich to boat? And the answer to that is definitely no. You know, we have our cost of looping calculator on our website where members who have finished the loop, we ask if they've kept details on what they've spent to put that in there for others to search. And I've seen results in there from anywhere, you know, from $10,000 for the entire loop from somebody on a very fuel efficient sailboat who primarily anchors out. Certainly possible, not everybody's style, but it's possible if that's something you enjoy. You know, we encourage everybody to do it in a way that is enjoyable for them. So tell us a little bit about how often, you know, a little bit about what you're comfortable sharing about costs, and also a little bit about your cruising style, the parts of the cruising style that directly impact the cost. You know, we talked pretty extensively at the beginning about the fuel consumption. And if anyone who's joined us now missed that, you can watch the replay. And, we kind of talked about how going faster is going to roughly, at least for Karen and Ken's boat, double the fuel cost for the same number of miles. So that's a cruising preference. That's their choice to go fast when they want to. So that's one thing that's going to affect the cost. But another thing is certainly how frequently you pull into marinas versus how frequently you anchor out. So tell us, again, I'm going around in circles a little bit, but a little bit about the cost that you're comfortable with and how the cruising style impacts that.
I would say for us, one of our first things about doing the loop was actually talking to each other and thinking for ourselves, why do we want to do the loop? And that kind of helped set a baseline for what we wanted to get out of it. And we wanted to learn the history, we wanted to see the country, and we wanted to meet people. And the best place to meet people is in marinas. And so for us, marinas are by far our biggest cost, way more than fuel, because we're in a marina almost every night, because that's our cruising style. That's what we're looking for, is to be where the other people are and to see the town and to meet the local people. So I'll start with that. But
yeah, and rightly so. I mean, in 18, I think we were about $9,000 in fuel. We averaged like $3.05 a gallon. Our boat is pretty economical for a twin. We can compete if we've got tide going with us or current of anything. We can compete with a single engine trawler doing 8 knots. Not exactly, but not much under, and still have the ability to go fast, of course. Fuel cost about $9,000. I think if I'd have to look at the paper, look at the spreadsheet, but I think we were about $13,000 in marinas. Marinas aren't cheap. They get cheaper as you come up into this area here, as you go into the Erie Canal. A lot of free docks, a lot of cheaper marinas. The East Coast is not cheap.
right.
You can average $1.50 to $3 a foot. I mean, depending on where you're staying.
I think we only anchored out or had free walls maybe 10% of the time. It's just not our deal.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. For those who are, go ahead, Ken.
And it's a great way to save money to anchor out, no doubt about it. We also like air conditioning, so we like to be in the marina and plug in.
When it's 90 in the summer, I'm going to plug in.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. But I appreciate you sharing that, because those who are curious about the costs, some of the costs really are fairly controllable. And if your boat is equipped to safely and comfortably anchor, and it's something that you enjoy, it can be a huge savings. So, and that's why when people ask the question, how much does it cost to do the loop? It's such a broad spectrum. And of course, the size of the boat also affects the marina costs. You're in a 388 Bayliner, correct?
Yeah,
39
foot.
Yeah,
40
foot. So 40 feet, which is actually right about on the average for looper-sized boats. But it's 25 or 20% less than a 50-foot boat if you're docking.
Right.
The cost is 20% less than that 10 extra feet if you had a 50-foot boat.
And you find out with the 50-foot boat that our fuel costs are probably 30% better. They're 30% more than we are to go that extra 10 feet. I mean,
so
it costs more to push the boat.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been aboard a Bayliner like Karen and Ken have, it's a big, comfortable boat.
It's not bad.
So
it works.
I don't think many would think that they're sacrificing comfort on a 40-foot boat in any way.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a good size to do it. I mean, we like I said, we know people that have done it in the center console outboard.
Yeah.
We cuddy cabin or not a whaler, maybe it was a whaler. Boston whaler. And the tugs, the American tugs are nice, the Ranger tugs, and there's a lot of them here, but
all sorts of sizes.
I would have a hard time, and it's to each their preference. I would have a hard time on our 25-foot Ranger tug, but to the people who can do it, that's their thing, and that's
It
it.
can
The
be
loop
done.
is yours.
Yeah.
It's not mine. You
Mhm.
know, I mean,
That's exactly right. That's a great way of saying it. And we actually did have Mike and Sharon O'Malley, my
Oh, yeah.
Sharona,
Uh-huh.
who is the the 20-foot center console that
Yeah.
did the loop, and they and I always say Sharon is worthy of sainthood.
Yes.
I would.
But and she didn't do the entire loop with Mike. She did most of it. Mike, for those of you who didn't see that DockTales, Mike looped in segments aboard that boat and would go back to work in between because he was not yet retired, still isn't retired. And Sharon went along when she could. She also works, and she had a blast too. I mean, they're a lot of fun, and I think you really have to have
They are.
that.
They are.
That fun spirit to do it on a 20-foot center console, but they loved every second of it, including, the thunderstorms that they get caught in. Those are the memories, I always tell people when they're facing some challenges on the loop, like when the Erie Canal was Lock 17 just last week or the week before.
Mhm.
It seems kind of like this big obstacle at the time, but those become the stories that people
That's
tend to
what's
share
special.
most.
Mhm.
So
And-
in
and-
2018 then,
Yes.
it seems like every year has at least one big challenge. So what was in 2018? Were there any big weather obstacles or closures or anything that you had to deal with?
Matthew.
Hurricane Matthew. Yeah,
Mhm.
it had hit the panhandle of Florida just like 3 weeks before we got down there, I think. And so everything around Pensacola and Panama City was closed,
Mhm.
and we were wondering, are we even going to be able to get through the ICW down there?
And then we kind of you
Yeah.
kind of had to take a step back and say, this is the worst thing we have to worry about. Can we find a place to stay?
Yeah.
Those people went through a lot. We're
Lost
from
their-
Florida. We know.
They lost
You
their
know?
homes, and we kind of felt bad that we were worried about
And
getting
we're
through
worried
the
about-
ICW.
Gee, will there be a marina to stay at?
No, there won't be.
No, there won't
Yeah.
be.
And that's, a lot of the obstacles that loopers face every year is part of the adventure. And that's a great attitude to have about it is, if this is the biggest obstacle, we're good to go.
Right.
And there certainly are some who have it worse. So Alex from Allison Lee is with us. Hi, Alex. Alex joins us for a lot of these. So
Hi,
it's
Alex.
good to see you, Alex. And he's on Lake Champlain now.
Ah.
So I guess Alex either waiting for Canada to open or heading back south, which kind of brings me to another question for Karen and Ken. You are on the Hudson, as we've said. You're with a pack of loopers. Some are continuing towards the Erie Canal. There's been a lot of talk this season of going to Maine, particularly because Canada is still looking very questionable and still not looking real promising that loopers can go to Canada. So Maine is a very popular option. So some of the boats that you're with, you are going to go from the Hudson, have to go back south to get to Maine because they can't go out to the St. Lawrence Seaway. So, you're in kind of a big group, at least looking at Nebo right now, but it sounds like everybody will be splitting up. Some will be heading for the Hudson for the Erie Canal and onto the Welland, some all the way through the Erie, some back south, which is a little bit different kind of than normal. But so what's that buzz like? Is everybody talking about, the different plans that they're making and deciding where to go next?
I don't think there's a lot of people going to at this point.
Well, that's until you look at Nebo, and there's a lot of people that went up the East River.
Yeah, to Maine.
To Maine.
Yeah. So most of them have peeled off already. If they're going that way, they've already
It's
peeled
these
off.
gold and platinum people that just seem to think they have to go to the pig roast at Shady Harbor. And then they're going to turn around and go back.
Yeah.
So, and Alex is headed south to the Chesapeake, so that'll be a nice
Yeah.
summer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know how far on Lake Champlain you are, Alex, if you're headed for the pig roast, but the pig roast that Karen and Ken are heading for is at Donovan's Shady Harbor Marina on the Hudson. And Brian Donovan and Kathy Donovan are sponsors, long-term sponsors of AGLCA. And right around this time every year, they have a big pig roast weekend for all of the loopers that are coming through. And I am sorry to be missing it. It sounds like a blast. One of these years, my schedule will line up so that I can get there because I would love to join y'all. And that's also, it's become a big event. So that's also probably a large part of the reason that you're in a bit of a larger group right now.
Yeah.
But so there's all kinds of variations for those of you watching on DockTales. As you've noticed, this is slightly different than DockTales, the beverage. We do it with the tales, the stories. There's been rocktails when people were in Georgian Bay. They've sent me pictures of having DockTales on the rocks. There's been locktails for people who have been stuck in a lock, enjoying some beverages, not the driver, but the others aboard waiting. But we also, thanks to one of our gold loopers, Herb, there's porch tails because Herb is from here in the South and has a big old back porch. Even in the South, we have our front porches mostly, but he's got a back porch on his boat. And that has also kind of added to some of the social aspects. So how many loopers are there? And I guess you moved on from where you, or is Herb with you?
Herb
Can't remember if it was last night or today.
Two boats in front of us right now at the dock.
Yeah, Herb's two boats up with Phantom, and
Terry on Magic is behind us.
Terry and Dorothy are behind us on Magic. But we just came yesterday from Half Moon Bay, and Herb was there and hosted a big porch tails on Phantom yesterday. And there were, I think he said 13 boats represented at porch tails yesterday, which was great.
And we met him in Annapolis. He was in Eagle Alley. I think overall we had about 50 people on and off the boat and sitting on the sidewalk and, trying not to tip the boat over.
So he's a big champion for developing friendships and camaraderie on the loop. He's just really an excellent host and encourager in that way.
Yeah,
he is, absolutely. And so how many boats, was it more than 13 boats that were actually at Half Moon Bay last night?
I think
there was 16.
I think so.
That were actually there, but some people had brought their boat and they were flying home and left it there. And of course, we had a car for a couple of days and we got up into upstate, got the other side of the river. It is gorgeous here. I mean, the drives are just absolutely gorgeous. The countryside, big hills, rocks, mountains. I mean, it's gorgeous here. It really is.
Yeah. And that's one of the bonuses of tying up in a marina and taking the opportunity to explore, because there's a lot to see beyond just what you'll see
there is.
on the water. So, what you're describing is not that unusual. 16 boats sounds like a lot. I remember 2017 at Trentport Marina. We had DockTales, and I think there were about 20 looper boats that pulled in that day. And it was right around July 1st, which is Canada Day, of course. And a lot of people were pulling it in there for the weekend. So from your experiences on your first loop, kind of, what's typical now? You're in kind of a group of 16 boats. Everybody hears about the social aspects. So from your experiences, how frequently will all of those boats continue together? How many will break off? How often do, those boating buddies travel together, or is it just kind of, we'll just all see what happens?
Yeah, it's very random. I mean, it sounds like we're in a group of 16, but we're not. There happened to be that many there
at one time
yesterday, but the day before there might have been 15 boats, but 4 of them were different,
Right.
So somebody yesterday coined it as loop frogging. You're loop frogging with other boats, because there's a couple of boats that we met way back down in South Carolina, and we've maybe seen them 3 or 4 times.
No, you've seen them on Nebo. You didn't really see them.
But
you
don't
saw
really,
them on Nebo.
Yeah, but you don't really see them in the marinas all that often, because for the most part, everybody's kind of doing their own thing and deciding which marina they're going to go to and how long they're going to stay. And so, it's rare that you are with the same boat very long unless you do it intentionally.
Yeah, I love the loop frogging. I have not heard that.
Yeah,
but it really does describe it perfectly.
It does.
But it really is. In 18, we would meet people, and then we got clear around into the lakes, and we were meeting all these new boats. And it's like, where did these people come from? I know we met everybody. No, we haven't met everybody, because you just don't, because everybody goes someplace different. We talked about coming out of the Keys or coming from our place across Okeechobee and starting up the East Coast. And well, the ICW is kind of, a narrow, you you figure out that there's not a whole lot of places to go. We tried this year to go to a lot of the out of the way places that kind of off the beaten path, the 25-mile trips to somewhere else, and it has been spectacular. The small towns to kind of bring you back to being when I was a kid. I grew up in a town of 1,100 people, so going to these little towns that haven't changed. But so you just go and but when we got into the Chesapeake, everybody goes like this.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah,
and everybody disappears, and then you get back up here, and it's like, okay, we get to Cape May, everybody makes it around the turn. You're in the Hudson, and now we're together again.
Yeah. Well, Kim is saying hello.
Hi, Kim, Bob.
Was Kim part of the 2018 fleet with you? Remind me her boat name.
Yes, she was on Happy Destiny.
Yes.
Hi, Kim. It's good to see you out there.
And she's kind of down in the Sarasota area.
Yep, they live down there now.
Gotcha. So tell us, some of your favorite memories of your first loop.
This one is really emotional for me. My dad was in the Air Force, and he's still alive, but he has real short-term memory loss. Yeah. But his long-term memory is amazing. And when we were going down the rivers, one of the obvious stops is Columbus, Mississippi. And that is where he trained for the Air Force before I was born. And we were sitting in the marina, and we were in the flight path for the T6s when they were doing training. And I called my dad and talked to him about it. And it's one of the best conversations I've had with my dad for a long time, because he just lit up, and he talked about flying there and then going to Texas when he did bomber school, and because he was in the Korean War. And it was just something I'll never forget.
Yeah. What a great memory. Ken, anything from you? Any, things that stand out from the first trip?
From the first trip, really that stood out. I guess I'm not a city person. You probably get that. Karen drugged me to the cities. I'm still not a city person, but I was pleasantly surprised with Chicago. Washington, D.C. was fantastic. I recommend that side trip to anybody.
Go up the Potomac.
Go up the Potomac and to Washington, D.C. We stayed at the Washington, D.C., the DC Capitol Yacht Club. And they treated us like we were members. I mean, it was great. Yeah. But to just go to D.C. and see the monuments and see a few of the museums, and it was rather moving. And like I
Arlington Cemetery.
And Arlington Cemetery was, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Alex chimed in. This was during Karen's story. That was a great story that you shared with that conversation with your dad where he remembers the training.
It was
really
fun. Another little piece of that was Bert. I don't know the name of his boat, but he was single-handing on Grady White.
On a Grady White.
And he was retired Air Force also, and he had trained in Columbus and was there when we were there too. So it was fun to be able to share with him what I was feeling with my dad and that kind of stuff. So it was really neat.
We had a car there, I think. I know we
used the
rental car or the loaner.
The loaner car, yeah.
And Bert was there, and I said, well, we're going to go out and find some barbecue. And he says, I'd really like to go and just see what's still here.
He said there's
old haunts.
Yeah, he said there's a couple places I'd really like to see if they're still here.
So we drove around, and we saw, some of the places, his old haunts, bars and restaurants, and we ended up at a little place and little barbecue place, and we kind of did the loop. Breweries and barbecue, or distilleries or wineries. It really didn't much matter. There are cocktails involved everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
And we walked in, and he says, well, this is a real barbecue place. And I said, so how do you know? And he said, well, at Southern Barbecue, he says, one, you'll have checkered tablecloths. You'll have white bread under the barbecue,
Yep.
so you can sop up all the juice when you're done.
Yep.
And he says, you'll have some sort of a religious symbol on the wall. And he says, that Elvis statue over there, that works.
Fun.
But, you know, these are the kind of relationships you get, you know,
Yeah,
and the things
absolutely.
you do.
Oh, hi, Kent.
I can't.
Hey,
Kent
Kent,
and
how are you?
Those were some of the very first loopers we met.
Mhm.
Before we looped in 2017, we were going to the Bahamas, and we met them in Fort Myers, and they went to the Bahamas with us in their boat at the time, Rising Tide.
With one-eyed dog.
And yeah, with one-eyed dog. And they really were instrumental, I think, in us choosing to do the loop.
Convincing us that we should do it.
They were very encouraging.
They did it in a sailboat.
In 13, 14, I think.
And told a story about turning the corner off the Mississippi and going up the Ohio. And they were running with a trawler, and they couldn't make it. They couldn't fight the current. And the guy in the trawler turned around and came back, hooked up to him, and towed him through the lock.
That's a good looping spirit of assistance there.
It's everywhere else.
It is.
Yeah.
Help out where you can. You know, people have boat problems, and I'm a pretty good mechanic, and, you know, I'm always willing to take a look rather than calling somebody in. Let me look at it before you call a mechanic. You know what I mean?
That's one of the great things about loopers is their willingness to help, and Ken and Karen are no exception, of course, to that.
No.
You did mention the loaner car, the courtesy car in Columbus. Have you, because that's one thing that did change during COVID, and I'm wondering if it's changed back, but during COVID, a lot of marinas were not allowing the loaner car, the courtesy car, to be used for fear of, you know, not being able to clean it thoroughly between uses. Right. So what's the current status, or have you even tried to use loaner cars?
We've seen it. We've had it.
I think we've only had one so
far. I wouldn't be surprised as we turn the corner and get up into the Erie that we'll maybe see more of them. Maybe not. Maybe they just use that opportunity to get rid of them. I don't know. In 18, we joked with the loopers that, you know, we were keeping track of the worst loaner car. How many things didn't work and how many idiot lights were on the dashboard in the loaner car. and I think we were where you broke your foot. Demopolis probably. Yeah, that car was a bomb. And Demopolis had this thing that you could use the loaner car, you could have it for an hour and a half, but you had to stop at the gas station coming back, and put 50 cents worth of gas in it. They wanted $1 in it, but you could never get that thing was like, and get a receipt. You would walk inside and the guy would go, here. I know you need a receipt.
So we have about a little bit more than 5 minutes left. So again, if anyone watching on Facebook has any questions, feel free to type those into the comments and we'll answer what we can. But Karen and Ken, with 1.5 or so loops down, what advice would you give to others who are, you know, currently, you know, maybe still dreaming or actively planning for starting the loop sometime soon?
Well, I'll start with something I mentioned earlier, is that before we did it, we consciously tried to put to words why we wanted to do it, because I think that helps you set a baseline for how you're going to approach it. So that helped us kind of know what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. Captain has another idea, or an additional idea.
I think really, since we've been boaters all our lives, but I mean, this is the biggest boat we ever owned. But our friends, Rick and Rocky, I mean, we've been out on their boats, a 36 and a 40 trawler, and their friends and our friends now that we boated with for years. But if you go out and you buy a 50-foot boat, and the biggest thing you've ever run around in is a runabout 19-foot bow rider, do yourself a favor, spend the money, hire the captain.
Mhm.
You don't want to learn by Braille.
And you don't want to be the show.
And you don't want to be the show. Because there'll be enough opportunities for those of us who have docked hundreds and hundreds of times to be the show ourselves. And a new boater without any idea what they're doing you can be the show. And you don't want to be that. You don't want to hit the dock. You don't want to hit another boat. You don't want to get out of control. And
also to know the systems.
And to know the
boat.
systems in the boat. I mean, I know people that have bought the boat. And in fact, I was reading today and somebody had said, well, we've had the boat for a year and we're still trying to figure out some of the things on how they work on the boat. Well, a good captain can do that for you. And even an insurance now that is another thing that's become very, very tough to get now. Even not necessarily for us. We went to Boat US 2 years ago because we wanted to go do the Berries and the Exumas and in the Bahamas, and Progressive didn't cover it, and they didn't ask any questions. But I'm really expecting to get the boat's 21 years old. We're going to get a survey. It's going to come. But that's my idea on it.
And that's great advice, because everyone really needs to be confident and competent in handling the boat and knowing the systems, and hiring a captain is a great shortcut to that if you don't want to spend the time on your own to get to that point. And Karen, I loved your idea because it's not something I hear often, and it really is. I can see where that would really help you set priorities on what you want to see and do, and things like your cruising preferences that we talked about. So thanks for sharing that. We did have several questions just kind of pop in. So this one's easy to answer. Alex is wondering if y'all are headed to the pig roast.
Pig roast.
Yep. And again, that's at Donovan's Shady Harbor this weekend. So thank you to Brian and Kathy Donovan for hosting that. And Kent is hoping you're going to do the Chattanooga side trip when you come on through.
Our Rangers 27 is waiting.
Yeah, we did Chattanooga last time. So priority this time is to do Nashville. And if we have time, we'll do Chattanooga again because we love Chattanooga.
That was a great trip. That river is another gorgeous trip.
Yeah, those side trips on the rivers are awesome.
So many people rave about the Tennessee River in particular, but lots of the side trips. This one's hard to answer. Matt's and Tracy asking for boat recommendations, originally thinking trawlers. So, of course, you have your Bayliner, which I know you are very pleased with for the loop. So maybe just kind of tell us again what it is about the Bayliner that makes it the right boat for you.
We love the interior space. We have a 14-foot beam, and if you're able, it has fairly narrow gunnels on the outside. So most of that 14 feet is inside. So we have a lot of living space inside. We have a fly bridge with an upper helm and a lower. We also have a lower helm. So for us, this is a great size. Like Ken talked about, we had various couples come and share time with us on the boat while we did the loop, and we were not uncomfortable with that. We like being able to go fast to outrun weather,
but not always.
Sometimes if the water's just a little bit choppy, she rides better at a fast speed than going like this through the waves. So to have that option, we really, really would not trade that.
I'd like to have a real pilot house.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't trade my fly bridge for it. I wouldn't.
Yeah. If we could change anything about the boat, we would have a pilot house, I think. But for us to be able to go fast when we want to, we rarely do, but it's nice to have the option.
Yeah. And for anyone who's watching who joined us a little bit late, lots of details about Ken and Karen's boat right at the beginning. So if you go back and watch the replay, first 5 or 10 minutes, we talked in a lot of detail about their boat and some of the specs of Island Girl. So you can check that out and see that. Greg would like to know if you had any unforeseen expenses that we might look out for. And that's going to vary greatly case by case. But any specific expenses that you encountered that you didn't expect, and also, kind of maintenance items to do prior to.
20-year-old boat on a 6,000 mile trip, you're going to have maintenance. If you don't, you got very lucky. We bought the boat with 950 hours on it, had about 1,100 when we started the loop, put 700 on it. We made about 400 miles and a turbo gave out on us. It started blowing oil all over the place. So being who I am, we're going to replace them both, which I did personally, but I had to air them in to get the turbos 2 days. We were in Cocoa Village. We no sooner left Cocoa Village and the alternator on the starboard motor went, which charges my house batteries. It went, so I had to 2-day air that out of California. And then we got to
Southport. This is all in 2018.
This is all in 18. This year, the boat's been...
Yeah, but we got to Southport.
We got to Southport. We had a bad vibration and a weird noise. We pulled it out in Southport, and it needed cutlass bearings. After that,
she was fine. Yeah.
The rest of 5,000 miles, she never gave us a lick of problem. Changed the oil and move on.
So we think a lot of that was age. Is just some things had reached their life capacity, but realized too, like you said, 3 oil changes in the course of the year because of the distance that you're traveling and the hours that you're putting on the boat. So it's always finding a place that you can do an oil change. And
they will take your oil.
Yeah, but fortunately, my mechanic does all the work himself, so that saves us money. Thank goodness.
And if you're mechanically inclined, do everything that on it you can, because at $125 an hour plus travel time, mechanics are expensive.
Plus, if you can do it yourself, you're not waiting on somebody. You're not having to find somebody, and you learn more and more about the boat the more you can do yourself. Great advice.
There's always going to be little things like, the toilet won't flush, or
there's always something.
The windshield wipers don't work, or the steering wheel fluid is falling out, or there's always something.
We have a saying. Just the two of us, and we share it with a lot of loopers. As I'm sitting here having a drink, something is breaking on the boat. I don't know what it is, but something is breaking on the boat.
I love that. And I think that is a great place to wrap it up for today. We're out of time. But that was, like I said, a great way to wrap it up, because it's so very true. It's a boat and things will break. But as is very clear from talking with Karen and Ken for the last hour, it's still a joy. They obviously have enjoyed looping. They're on their second loop. We wish you safe cruising and lots of fun all the way through. And hopefully I'll catch up with you again on the way.
Maybe we'll see you Paul run. You never know.
Loop frog.
But thanks for your time today. We appreciate you sharing your stories and your information with us. It's really been a lot of fun. And thanks to everyone who has watched it on Facebook. We do these every 2 weeks, but we are actually, the next one is going to be 3 weeks from today due to some vacation schedules at the Homeport Group. So we thank you for being with us. Enjoy the pig roast this weekend. Tell everyone we said hi.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.